I stood before the wrought iron gates of Ashcroft Academy, my suitcase dragging at my arm like an anchor. The wind howled, tugging at my coat, and the sky above churned with bruise-colored clouds. The building itself seemed to crouch against the horizon, its jagged spires piercing the air, its windows dark and unblinking. I'd come here for a new beginning, a teaching job to pull me out of the wreckage of my old life. But as I stepped through the gates, they clanged shut behind me with a sound like a scream. Inside, the hall stretched endlessly, warped and shadowed. The air smelled of mildew and something sour, something I couldn't place. My footsteps echoed too loudly, as if the floor itself was hollow. I clutched my welcome letter tighter, the edges crinkling in my grip. "Miss Evelyn Carter," it read. "Room 12. Classes begin tomorrow." Simple enough. Yet every breath I took felt borrowed. "Miss Carter." The voice sliced through the silence, sharp as a blade. I jumped, spinning to see Mrs. Grayson, the headmistress, standing at the hall's end. Her face was all angles, her eyes sunken beneath a graying brow. She didn't move closer, just stared. "Yes, that's me," I said, forcing a smile. "Follow me." Her words were clipped, her heels snapping against the tiles like gunfire, as she led me deeper into the school. "Your quarters are sufficient. Stay out of the West Wing after dusk, structural concerns." I wanted to ask why, but her tone was a locked door. Instead, I nodded, though the air seemed to thicken around me, pressing against my ribs. My classroom was a time capsule. The desks were scarred with initials and strange, looping carvings. A cracked chalkboard hung crookedly, its surface smeared with ghostly traces of equations I didn't recognize. I set my bag down, the thud swallowed by the silence, and crossed to the window. The glass was warped, distorting the courtyard below into a smear of gray and green. Then I saw her. A girl, maybe 10, stood motionless beneath a leafless tree. Her dress was outdated, faded blue, tattered at the hem, and her hair hung in dark, wet strands. She didn't move, didn't blink. She just watched me. I froze, my breath fogging the glass. Her head tilted, slow and deliberate, and her lips curled into a smile that wasn't a smile at all. The lights buzzed and dimmed. I blinked, just once, and she was gone. Sleep didn't come that night. I sat at the rickety desk in my quarters, my lesson plans spread out like a map to nowhere. The room was frigid, the radiator hissing uselessly. The clock ticked too loudly, each second a hammer against my skull. Then I heard it. Scratch. Soft but close. Scratch. Scratch. It came from the wall behind me. I turned, my chair creaking, and stared at the peeling wallpaper. Nothing. Just my imagination, I told myself. Just the stress. But when I looked back at my desk, my papers had moved. One sheet lay apart from the rest, face up. A drawing, crude, done in pencil. It was Ashcroft Academy, its towers jagged and black. But the lines were smeared with red, like blood seeping from the stone. And in the courtyard, a figure stood tall, too tall, its arms bent at wrong angles. Scrawled beneath it, in handwriting that looked like mine but wasn't, "You never left." My stomach dropped. The floorboards groaned, and from the hallway a giggle, high and brittle, slipped under the door. Morning came, gray and heavy. My students filed in, their faces pale, their eyes too big. They sat without a sound, staring at me like I was a specimen pinned under glass. I tried to teach, something about fractions, but my voice felt distant, like it belonged to someone else. A girl in the back row raised her hand. Her nails were bitten to the quick. "Yes," I said, my throat dry. She didn't blink. "It knows you're here." The words hit me like a slap. "What?" She smiled, just like the girl outside, and went back to her workbook. I stumbled through the day, the weight of their gazes crawling over my skin. By nightfall, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers. With my flashlight trembling in my hand, I crept into the west wing. The air grew colder with every step, the shadows thicker. Doors lined the corridor, their paint chipped and curling. One stood out, its wood charred, as if kissed by fire long ago. A rusted plaque read, "Room 7. I reached for the knob. A draft rushed out, smelling of ash and decay, and the door swung open before I could turn it. The room was small, its walls scored with names, dozens, hundreds scratched into the plaster. I stepped inside, my beam of light shaking across the chaos. The names blurred together, Thomas, Eliza, Margaret, until I saw it. At the bottom, carved deeper than the rest, Evelyn Carter. My knees buckled. I knew this place, not from photos or stories, but from somewhere inside me, a memory I couldn't grasp. I'd been here before, not as a teacher, as something else. The flashlight flickered. Behind me, the door slammed shut, and in the dark, I heard it, a voice soft and sing-song, whispering my name.